Hello and welcome. My name is Stephanie Adams, and I will be the host for this TLC session. We are excited that you have joined us today for helping students achieve school, work, family balance. Please welcome Oscar Lewis.
Hi there. How is everybody today? I'm trusting we're all doing okay. Our objectives. How do we help our students achieve the balance between schoolwork and home? How can we do more? Does assessment factor into this? And is balance even possible, or is it a myth? Our first quote comes from the Coca-Cola Company. And he says, we all have a lot of balls in the air, whether it's work, family, health, friends, work, school, all of that. And he says, work is a rubber ball. If you drop work, it's going to come back and things will be there for you. If you drop one of the other balls, they're glass. And we all know what happens when a glass ball breaks or falls. So keep that in mind. Some things are irrecoverable. So we need to make sure we can keep up with what's going on. William Penn, the famous founder of Pennsylvania, time is what we want most, but what we use worst. And time equals life. Therefore, waste your time, waste your life. Or master your time, master your life. I think all of us would like to be able to do that. So how do we balance what demands we have on our time? What can we do? First and foremost, what's important? You will find over time your priorities change, but you need to always consider what's important versus what's not. The second comes from the management consulting industry. Track your time. Inherently, you become more efficient with your time when you track it. Concentrate on one thing at a time. Don't try and do 7 or 8 things all at once. Chances are you'll mess them up. Schedule something you look forward to each day. A wise man I once knew told me, he says, Oscar, always try to have a little bit of fun every day. That's what you can look forward to. Respect your private time, the time that is yours, or the time that is yours with your family. Use it. Take your time to be with your family. Take a look at your personal habits and general lifestyle. Some of us, and I'm hoping no one listening here is of that ilk, but I know at least one person who's on this today got a little lax with his personal lifestyle and habits, and it took a bit of doing to get where I took care of myself a little better. And I dropped 70 pounds and started taking care of myself. And now I can tell the difference. Ask for support. And this is especially important in the online community. Ask people for help. Ashford does an outstanding job reaching out to students, faculty, staff, and takes very good care of their community. But if you're like me, you and are primarily teaching online, you're in rural, in my case, South Carolina, sometimes you get that feeling you're alone. You're not. You need to reach out. Luckily, I'm in the Forbes School of Business. We have some excellent, excellent department heads, and all I have to do is just talk to them. And it doesn't matter what I'm talking to them about. Sometimes, yes, it's a problem with school, but sometimes it's just, hey, are you guys out there? Set boundaries. And in the setting of boundaries, you have to learn to say no. Again, I know one person here today has had a problem doing that. And I can remember I was chief financial officer of a large aircraft parts manufacturer in Seattle. And I had plenty on my plate between the financial part of the job and human resources. But I decided, I should take on training and education and a couple of other things, safety. And I got overextended. You need to say no. And consistently evaluate your work-life balance. Make sure you are doing the things you need to do and the things that are important to you. First, there's an 80-20 rule, and I think all of us have heard of that. It's called the Pareto principle. 80% of your results come from 20% of your actions. So, you want to make sure you're focusing on that 20% of the activities that will produce 80% of your desired results. Your habits and lifestyle. Can you delete something? Are there consequences to not doing the task at all? Delegate it. If it's that important, should somebody else be doing it, or can somebody else be doing it? Do it now. You produce anxiety, you produce stress by procrastination. And defer. If you can't get something done quickly and it's not a high priority, get rid of it. Defer it. Take the time to start to do something else. When others make requests of you, these tasks may be important to them, but conflict with what's important to you, especially when it's something you'd like to do, but don't have time for. It can be very difficult to say no. For example, I had one of my sons call me and said, "Dad, why don't we go to the Panthers game Sunday?" And I am sitting there going, as much as I'd like to, your mom and I have something planned. So let me do that instead. And you want to be a team player, but you also need to let people know that you might not be able to handle their request at that particular moment. If you agree to the task, make sure you agree to a reasonable deadline. And we all have distractions. I know the very first thing I do when I get up in the morning is I play a little game called 7 Little Words. And some of you may have it. It's on the internet, and they give clues and tiles to put together 7 words from the definitions they give you. That is the very first thing I do every morning. So what do you have? Do you have Facebook, Twitter? Are you always checking your emails? Are you messaging friends and family? Set some time to do this and deal with all of them at once. Say, set 30 minutes twice a day. And that's when you Facebook, Twitter, check your emails, message, and then stop. And don't go back to that until it's time to do that again. So how can we help students? We need to make sure we're talking about this in our classes, especially new online students. Online students, especially new ones, need to get in tune with the pace of what is going on and what's expected of them. So any help we can give them will be of use. There are websites to study. I gave one here. There are others in the references at the end. Always have your students reminded that, hey, it's important for them to keep up. It's also important for them to take time for their support team. And one of the best ways to help your support team is go to graduation. Walk at graduation. It's not for you. It's for your support team. All that they've put up with while you've been studying and taking time away from them. This is to let them see the fruits of what you've accomplished as a student. So always encourage students to walk at graduation. It's one of the greatest things they will ever do. In terms of assessment, if any of you are faculty, I'm sure you've heard from students, I just need to get an A in this course. Well, that's wonderful. Maybe you do need to get an A, but you know, you can't just focus on that at the extent of everything else. You've got to take the time to balance things out. And is it the end of the world to get a B as opposed to an A? Some people think that. Personally, I don't. But we want students to excel. That's not what I'm saying. I just don't want it to be at the expense of having a normal life. we need to understand, if we're faculty, life gets in the way. I heard from a student this morning, and she said, Professor, I had to move my parents this weekend. They were in Ventura, California, in the path of the fires and needed to evacuate. Well, okay, she's a little late with some things. However, we also got that extra day with the Veterans Day. So it worked out for her, but you can't hold that against a student when things happen. And do we nitpick? And I know some do, some don't. If you turn in an original response and it's 2 minutes late, or it's 195 words instead of 200 minimum, how big of an issue is that truly? Is that, I realize it isn't timely, it isn't the minimum, but how important is it really? And if in that 195 words, they've covered the topic well and asked some very good questions, made some great discussion points, is that an issue that needs to be addressed? Always encourage students to communicate issues. Technology issues come to mind frequently. Computers crash. We've had a lot of storms this spring and this fall where people lost the internet. And we have weather events. We not only have the fires going in California, but in the Northeast, we've had some severe weather. And I know here, where I am in South Carolina, and I'm on the border with North Carolina, we had 2 hurricanes. So these things happen. We need to be aware of them, make sure we are taking care of our students so that they aren't feeling compelled, oh, I've got to get my schoolwork in. Yes, it's important, but there's other things that are important too. And one of the really important ones, we want our students to be safe. So, is balance a myth? You can't sit there and put everything in a silo and say, well, work's over here, family's over here, life activities are over here, school's over there. We can't do that. Life isn't like that. So the important thing is set priorities, set your boundaries. You can achieve that balance you're looking for. And that should be your first priority every single day. Now, what I'd like to do before we get into questions is simply extend my heartfelt thanks to each of you for coming. But also, if any of you or your families are affected by either the weather or the fires, my heart to you. I know how much you're going through, and we're with you. We're with you. We're thinking about you all the time. So please be aware that we at Ashford do care. And at this point, if I could ask Stephanie to open this up to the chat room.
It's open.
The chat room is open. All right. Have we got any questions? And by the way, at the end here, I do have some good websites that address the subject of work-life balance, and a book, How to Get Control of Your Time and Your Life. I stopped sharing. Okay. Let me get back here. Hello, as an enrollment services advisor, how can I help prepare students for challenges before they even interact? What do you recommend? First, Jessica, I would say I would explain to them, most of all, this is a huge commitment that they are making. And I know you do that. And then when you get to the part of maybe trying to quantify the commitment, you know, we're talking, I would say, in the area of 10 hours a week between the reading, the discussions, and the assignments, and in some cases more. And the school has wonderful resources to help with that, with the tutoring, things like that. But by all means, I would, after I had talked with them about the commitment and perhaps the amount of hours, I would look at one of these websites, maybe print something out that talks about how you're going to have to deal with this. And these are good practical tips. I think that would be of quite a bit of help. In regards to accommodating, how much time can we give them? Wow. And I would agree. I always negotiate a deadline. By that, I mean, if a student comes to me and says, Professor, let me tell you, my grandmother died, and I won't be back until Tuesday. And yes, the assignment's due Monday. I'm out of sorts right now. I haven't got it. I would say, you know what? Why don't we try for Thursday? And let me know if that's going to be a problem. And then if they can't make Thursday, that's okay to an extent. But I would start maybe with the late penalties at a slightly reduced rate, but no one's going to get a free ride, and they need to understand that. I really think a lot of our students who have been here a number of years understand that. Uh, I liked one says communicate with the instructor. You know, I'm sure all of us provide phone numbers, provide email addresses, uh, text capabilities, whatever, for them. And I swear at times I think my wife gets jealous at some of the people who call me week after week. But you know, it's important to them, and therefore it ought to be important to me. They want to do their best job, and I do understand why they have questions. I happen to teach a course primarily that is probably one of the harder online courses. Probably be a little easier to take face to face, but you have to put up. You have to be able to communicate with the student, and this is where that Canvas really helps to make sure you're keeping up and saying communicating well with your students. It's funny. I find I get notices for perhaps less than average Canvas or engagement, but those are the students who are doing really well in the course. And I have to force myself to take time for them because I worry more about the ones who don't get it than the ones who are. But the ones that are also need our time. And I found myself recently really putting an effort into doing that. Do we have anything else? Oh, uh, Joyce Williams says, we have late penalties and time limits, but we'll waive the late penalty. We are given some discretion. And then how do you handle working with students who tell you they arrived with a 3.97 GPA and frustrated by their performance and it's week 2? We are in a culture where people think it's getting things right the first time and every time. But we learn through our mistakes. That's a great point you're making. I need to acknowledge that, Clifford. And there's nothing wrong, really, with making a mistake. Getting a B may mean you learn more than somebody who got an A. And there's nothing wrong with that. But students see that as a threat to their GPA. You're right. And there's nothing, there are things I dislike more. One of the things I find distasteful is a student coming to you either 10 days before class ends or that last week and say, I've always made A's and now I've got a B in your class. Well, you need to let me know well in advance of this. You can't do that. But yeah, there is a lot of pressure from people on grades, and I would agree, Clifford. It's a burden we have to bear, and we almost have to bear it with students individually, because some will make sense. I've had a student would say, well, I've always made A's, and they couldn't put a sentence together. So I'm guessing maybe they didn't always make A's. But I have to look at the student. I have to check their work that they've done so far. And then I will make an assessment, and I'll talk to them. And basically what I want out of this whole thing is buy-in. That they're going to be happy, I'm going to be happy, the school's going to be happy. And that takes a little bit of effort on our part, but I do think it's important to all of us to do that. All right, I think we're done.
I wanted to thank all three of you so much for
Yeah, there was one more question, but unfortunately,
from Logan?
if you can answer it quickly.
If I have an assignment due that day and waiting, wow. Logan, I think you have to talk to your, first of all, your academic advisor, and then read the handbook on academic leave. But I will tell you, if you were in my class, I would, if you told me you had applied for academic leave or an academic hardship or whatever, I would definitely be on your side as to having a slightly extended deadline.